living often in environments where we were one of a handful of Black families. I think our racial identity and our pride in being Black is very important to me. So I, always felt a need to, even as a young child, to be well read and well versed in Black politics and Black identity during the 70s and whatnot. And so by the time I got to college, I was incredibly active in the Black Student Union. I was president for 2 years. I, did a lot of bringing Black community activists to Stanford campus, working closely with the administration on diversity and creating more opportunities for Black and Brown students. So really was connected to racial equity and racial justice through the lens of being Black. Once I came out, I kind of kept that piece, but then I added this component of as a gay man, and at that moment, the thing that was most impactful was my world was being decimated by HIV and AIDS. I was, 28, 29, 30 years old and losing people who I had just met, who were becoming part of my world. And so threw myself headlong into HIV and AIDS work. So participated in ACT UP demonstrations, went to ACT UP meetings fairly regularly. I volunteered at an organization called God's Love We Deliver, which at that time was set up to deliver meals to people who were homebound with AIDS. And so 3 days a week during lunch, I would travel around with my brown bags and go to people's homes and, deliver hot meals, and worked every holiday doing that piece too. And at some point realized that the disconnect between my professional life and this activism, I needed to narrow that gap. So that's what I really pivoted into. Like, I'm going to work in an AIDS organization. Like, that's going to be my professional life. It was already my political life and very much my social life. And then it became my professional life. So I had this 20-year period of time where those three components of my life were very intertwined. And I socialized to people who did the same work I did, all AIDS activists, LGBTQ activists. We were all doing, work in that area. We all went to the same conferences. We all did a lot of the same activities. And I also ran. I was the executive director of an AIDS organization for a while, and served on the board of AIDS organizations. And so I have remained really consistent and very active in that world. So I'm having to think where I was living and what space I was moving in back during the AIDS epidemic, and what space I'm occupying now. When I try to line those two things up, I have to say that I find a lot of similarities between the world's reaction to HIV and AIDS and this country's reaction to HIV and AIDS and a treatment of how we've handled the pandemic. The government is not, in its ideal setting, the government should be a place that has the interests of people, public health, emotional health at heart. And I think in both instances, through the AIDS epidemic and through the pandemic, we've seen that that's not always the case. And so in those moments, I think it becomes more important for communities and community to be the impetus for organizing and systemic change. We needed that around HIV/AIDS, everything from education to medical treatment. We need the same thing, still educating people about public health things in the pandemic, still having to educate people about the importance of public health and public safety in a way that, just is mind-boggling to me that it's so similar. much more so than I would have realized. So I think there's really a need, because I move around in the nonprofit sector, there really is a need for our nonprofits to be, stronger than ever. Because the government is not necessarily where you're going to find change or action. That's not, that's not what they do. So it really, it really is going to be about folks coming together and organizing in a way that's profound. I also have to say, too, that both the AIDS epidemic and the pandemic have reinforced to me the underlying notion of racial injustice and racial inequality in this country. Like it couldn't be more pronounced to me. And I think that's probably the biggest take-home message, is that, there have been progress in some ways and in some areas, and in many ways, there's not been any from a societal perspective. And that both saddens me, and it's also challenging. But it's also like, you know what? I'm more determined than ever to make a difference in the space I move around in. And so that's, I think that's really important to kind of acknowledge too. So I think that, I have a very visceral reaction to the level of activity around oppression, anti-oppression work, and DEI work, and how folks are mobilizing and talking about changing institutions. And it's colored more by being a Black man than by being LGBTQ. But I also figure, it's for me part of the same coin. They're both related. And it means that people value you. People haven't seen you, or they've seen you as something less than. And anytime you're seen as something less than, when you realize that you're not, it's a shock to folks. And so I'm glad that there's been a lot of activity. I hope that it's not short-lived. I want to believe that when people say systemic change, they mean systemic change. And I hope they also are ready to embrace the fact it may mean dismantling some systems that we have. And that's where I think the rubber will meet the road, and we'll find out sort of if people are really serious about the work that needs to be done in this country.